The kettle had just clicked off when my phone buzzed. I wiped my hand on the edge of my old housecoat before picking it up, the threadbare cotton catching on my ring. The message read, "Hope the Merrick family meeting goes well today." I saw them all headed to the new bistro. Looked like a big group. Janice, the neighbor 2 doors down. The one who always notices things. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. It didn't feel like news, more like a confirmation. The tea sat steeping, untouched. I picked up my phone again and tapped Brad's name. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I didn't try again. I opened Facebook the way I do when I don't want to seem like I'm waiting. I scrolled slowly, and there it was. A photo tagged by Tessa. Long wooden table, pressed white napkins, wine glasses half full. Brad at the center raising his glass. Tessa leaned into his shoulder, smiling like a woman who'd just won something. Ellie, my granddaughter, sat between them in a yellow dress I'd never seen before, and Lauren, my daughter, stood at the edge of the frame just behind a vase of tulips, hands clasped. I zoomed in. At first, it was the faces I searched for. Then my eyes landed on the corner of the table. A tan folder slightly open with papers splayed out beneath a phone, legal-sized clipped. One page had a signature line visible. I turned off the stove. The hum of the refrigerator was louder than I remembered. Upstairs, I opened the drawer in the old roll-top desk Walter once used for his hunting permits and utility bills. I kept things simple, original deeds. The house title, a durable power of attorney form, I'd never filled out because I wasn't ready. But now the stack was thinner. A familiar envelope with my handwriting was missing. I didn't panic. I just stood there, my fingers resting on the empty space as if it might explain itself. The mirror across the room caught my eye. I hadn't brushed my hair yet. My housecoat was unbuttoned at the top. I still had my slippers on. I looked like someone who belonged in the background of a life, not the center. I took my tea downstairs. It had gone cool, but I drank it anyway. A faint stain of turmeric floated near the rim left over from yesterday. The house was silent. I could hear birds outside, but they seemed farther away than usual. The doorbell rang once. Not hurried, not uncertain. I opened the door to find Lauren standing there, her keys still in her hand. She was in the same clothes from the photo: navy blouse, slim skirt, no jacket. Her lipstick had faded, and her hair had started to fall at the sides. She stepped in without waiting for an invitation. I didn't speak. She set her purse down like it was fragile. Then she looked at me, then past me. "You weren't home when we left," she said quietly. I didn't answer. She pulled out her phone, tapped at something, then put it face down on the coffee table. It was just lunch. Nothing official. I sat down slowly. My cup made a soft tap against the table as I set it down. There were papers, I said, not really asking. She nodded barely. "Just preliminary drafts." Brad brought them. "Tessa said it might be good to have a plan, just in case." I waited. Lauren picked at her nail. She used to bite them when she was nervous. Now she just peeled the polish off in strips. I didn't know they were going to have it printed. I thought they'd at least talk to you first. I looked at her and she looked down. I didn't sign anything, she added quickly, as if that cleared her. The mirror on the opposite wall caught her reflection. She looked younger there, like the girl who used to read books under the kitchen table while I cooked. The girl who once cried when her brother blamed her for breaking the porch light. She stood up. "Mom, I think—" She hesitated. "Then you wouldn't have wanted to be surprised in front of everyone. That's all." I folded my hands in my lap. My fingers pressed together tightly, knuckles pale. Lauren glanced toward the hallway like she needed to be somewhere else. "Brad said he'll call you. Tomorrow, maybe." I nodded once just to end it. She walked to the door, opened it, paused. "It's just because they care, I didn't look up. I listened to the door close, then the wind shift the curtain. I sat like that for a long time. No music, no news, no movement. Just the shallow ring of porcelain where my cup had rested and the soft imprint it left on the wood. The papers were printed. The meeting happened. The signatures had a place waiting. And my name, if it was there, hadn't been spoken aloud. She said I wouldn't want to be embarrassed in front of everyone. She was wrong. I could have survived embarrassment. What I wasn't sure I could survive was the quiet certainty that they never planned for me to be in the room at all. I used to believe that if I made things easier for everyone else, I might be harder to forget. The box I keep Ellie's toys in is faded around the edges. The corners are soft now, not from wear, but from the way I've touched them gently, as if she might come asking for something inside. I folded her pink sweater and placed it on top. The one with the unicorn, the horn nearly rubbed smooth. She left it here in March. No one's asked about it. Brad once told me in passing that I had a tendency to overcomplicate things. He was holding a stack of investment brochures, flipping through without reading. I had asked if he was sure about moving his accounts offshore. I didn't understand the details. I had nodded anyway. He didn't look up. After Walter passed, there were 2 homes in my name, the one I live in now, and the small row of rentals he bought in the 90s. Nothing fancy. 1-bedroom units with peeling porches and good bones. Brad said the upkeep would be too much for me. I agreed. I signed the listing agreement. The profit covered his shortfall from a failed startup. That was the first time I saw him relieved in months. He never said thank you. I never asked for one. When Tessa changed the address for the family's bank correspondence to their new condo, I didn't protest. I assumed it was for efficiency. She said I didn't need to worry about paperwork anymore, that she was streamlining the burden. She handed me a folder, once asked me to just initial here. I did. I don't remember what it was for. At the time, I thought at least they're still coming around. At least I'm still included, even if it's in silence. Tessa's company held its launch party 3 years ago. She wore a red dress that caught the light and gave a toast about ambition and building a legacy. Brad beamed. They had the event catered at her mother's lake house. I offered to help set up, and somehow ended up in the kitchen the whole night. I washed champagne flutes until my fingers shriveled, listening to the laughter in the next room. Tessa's mother sat at the center table between the mayor's wife and a real estate developer. Someone introduced her as the matriarch, behind the brilliance. I stood behind a half-closed pantry door when I heard that, drying my hands on a napkin. No one mentioned me. Later that night, Brad passed me on his way out. He was balancing a box of centerpieces. "Don't forget the leftover shrimp," he said. I nodded. I still don't know why I stayed that long, or why I returned the serving platters the next day polished. When Ellie was born, I crocheted a blanket by hand. I chose pale yellow and moss green, soft enough for spring. Tessa folded it neatly and put it in the closet. She said she wanted the nursery to be minimalist. "Textiles can overwhelm newborns," she explained. The blanket never came out again. I saw it once under a pile of linens when I helped change their guest bed. I didn't ask about it. I brought books instead. Then music classes. Then covered preschool tuition. I kept thinking that if I did more, said less, I might not get edged out. Lauren once offered to take me to lunch after an appointment. We sat on a bench outside the cafe waiting for a table. She scrolled through her phone while I held the to-go menus. "You're too available, Mom," she muttered, eyes still on the screen. That's the problem. She meant it as advice, but it landed like a dismissal. The word available has a way of sounding generous until it's turned against you. I started saying yes to everything because it felt like a form of staying. Not because I wanted to agree, but because I feared what might happen if I didn't. I let Brad tell me which accountant to use. I let Tessa draft the holiday messages. When they asked for a key to the house, just in case we need to check on things, I made a copy. I even labeled it with a blue sticker so they'd know it was the front door. That key has never been returned. I don't remember the last time I was asked what I wanted. I remember being told often what made sense. Let's just make this simple. It's really better for everyone this way. No offense, but it's not your generation's strong suit. I started marking the edges of my world with silence. Not out of resignation, but from the understanding that no one really listens when your voice is the softest in the room. I stacked Ellie's puzzles into the bin one by one, turning each piece upright before sliding the lid shut. I ran my thumb along the edge, checking for splinters. The cat puzzle had a missing tail. It always had from the day she opened it. She never seemed to mind. She'd just call it the sleepy one. That morning, I found her drawing tucked behind a chair. Crayons bold and uneven. A house, a sun, a stick figure with white hair holding a child's hand. The word grandma written in green across the bottom. There was no adult standing beside them. No mom, no dad, just us. It reminded me that children don't always need the full picture to see the truth. I think I believed for a long time that if I remained useful, I would remain wanted. But it's possible to be used often and seen rarely. And the difference between those two is a line you don't notice until you've crossed it barefoot, and it's already cut deep. I didn't speak those thoughts aloud. I folded them into the drawer with Ellie's sweater beside an old receipt for a birthday cake and the church bulletin with Walter's name printed beneath in loving memory. Some things you keep not for proof, but because they once mattered enough to hurt. And sometimes that's the only reason you need. I don't know when my name stopped appearing on things that mattered. There's a drawer in the hallway cabinet that sticks. I always have to tug twice first. Gently, then like I mean it. That's where I keep the cards. Birthday cards, holiday cards, notes with scribbled crayon, hearts and crooked I love you S. They're not in order. Some years are missing altogether. I noticed that the last one signed Just Love Brad was from 2015. After that, it was printed names on glossy cardstock. Last Christmas, the envelope read, "To Dad, Tessa, Ellie, and Lauren." No comma after Lauren, no space left for me. I turned it over in my hands before placing it in the pile. The inside had a photo of them at the orchard, everyone in coordinated sweaters holding mugs. Brad wore navy. Tessa had on a cable knit cream. Ellie's smile was missing a front tooth. Lauren stood slightly off to the side, one hand mid-wave. Beneath the photo, it read, "Grateful for family every season." There was no handwritten note. Not even an initial. I didn't mention it. When Ellie won her art scholarship in the spring, there was a small gathering at the community center. Folded chairs, store-bought cake, paper plates that bent in half if you weren't careful. Tessa gave a little speech. She talked about creativity, support legacy. She thanked the grandparents who encouraged Ellie's imagination. She turned toward her own parents in the second row and smiled. I was seated directly behind them. No one turned around. The following week, I found the drawing Ellie had submitted to the contest, an underwater scene, coral and sea turtles. I had given her the markers for her birthday. They were the kind that don't bleed through. I remember because the woman at the store said children notice that sort of thing. I left that drawing on my fridge until the edges curled. Brad's birthday came in July. I found one of Walter's old watches in a velvet case in the back of the closet. It hadn't been worn since the year he stopped traveling. The leather band was cracked, but the face still ticked when I wound it gently. I had it cleaned, wrapped it in brown paper with twine. At the restaurant, they had rented the private room. Brad ordered wine for the table before I sat down. Lauren helped me fold my coat. Ellie ran over to show me her new bracelet, something shiny with little beads that clicked when she moved her wrist. Tessa gestured at the waiter. When the food came, Brad made a toast. To new beginnings, he said, and to letting go of the old stuff. No one clinked glasses. Tessa touched his arm anyway. I placed the wrapped box in front of him near the end of the meal. He glanced at it, pushed it toward his briefcase, then resumed talking about refinancing their second property. He didn't open it. Not then. Not later. When I got home, I checked the mailbox out of habit. Inside was a thin envelope from the DMV. My car registration had been updated, but the return address was Tessa and Brad's condo. I had never asked for that change. There was also a notice for jury duty. It had been redirected twice. My name, at least, was still on those. In the days after Walter's funeral, I had stood at the podium with my notes folded small in my palm. I hadn't written much. Just a few lines about his way of stacking napkins, how he always refilled my gas tank when he borrowed the car, how he never once came home without hanging his coat. Simple things. When I sat down, Brad leaned in and whispered, without turning his head, "You didn't need to make it about yourself." The room had already moved on to the next hymn. I folded the note in my hand until it was too small to read. There's a box in the upstairs closet under the sweaters I no longer wear. Inside are ribbons from school recitals, a pressed maple leaf Ellie gave me on a walk, a faded receipt from the diner where Walter and I used to meet on Thursdays. At the bottom is a guest list from Brad and Tessa's wedding, the one I helped handwrite place cards for. My name was printed then, mother of the groom in cursive. It had a gold leaf at the corner. The last time I saw a printed card with my name on it was a doctor's appointment reminder sent to Phyllis Merrick, Emergency Contact NA. I had filled out that form myself. I used to keep a calendar with everyone's birthdays circled in red. I switched to pencil after Tessa changed the date of Ellie's party 3 times in 1 week. Now I write nothing down. The silence saves more space than paper ever could. When I open drawers now, I half expect something to be gone, or replaced, or renamed. Sometimes it's easier to forget than to find the things that remind you you've been left behind. When I hear my name, it's from people at the pharmacy, or the clerk at the co-op. Occasionally from Lauren when she's asking about a package, or if I've eaten. Brad calls me Mom, but only when he needs an answer quickly. Tessa never calls me anything at all. I no longer expect them to remember me the way I once was. I'm not sure they ever did. I used to believe that memory lived in objects, in keepsakes, ticket stubs, magnets from road trips. But now I think memory lives in how often a person says your name, and how rarely they hesitate before doing so. When people stop saying your name, maybe they're rehearsing the version of life where you no longer fit. Maybe they already live there. And maybe in that version my seat at the table is still warm, but only because someone else is using it. It's strange how softly betrayal can arrive almost like a child's breath against your collarbone. Ellie's footsteps were too light to hear. I only noticed her when she leaned against the side of my leg, her cheek pressing into the worn cotton of my house dress. Her pajama sleeves were pulled down past her wrists, and her voice was smaller than usual, as though even she wasn't certain it should exist. "Grandma, Mommy and Daddy said they're taking your money tonight." I didn't move. My hands were still damp from wiping down the counter. A faint ring of water clung to the dish towel slung over my shoulder. She looked up at me like she'd given away a secret she didn't understand. I knelt beside her, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "They said you don't need all that money," she whispered again. "That they'll help you before you forget stuff." The kitchen light flickered once, just a stutter, and I thought of the old bulbs Walter used to replace without being asked. I nodded as if she'd reminded me of something simple, then walked her back to bed. I tucked the quilt under her chin and stayed there long enough to count her breaths. She slept soundly. I didn't. I sat in the den with the financial folder open in front of me, the one Walter labeled in his blocky handwriting. I ran my finger over the ink where his name once appeared beside mine. There was a small tear in the manila cover from where a paperclip had been removed. It hadn't been like that last week. The clock ticked so evenly, it sounded detached, like it was measuring something that no longer applied to me. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a long time. Just sat with the folder resting in my lap like something warm that had gone cold too fast. By morning, the weight in my chest hadn't shifted. I moved through the house slowly, like I didn't want to wake it. I paused at the doorway to the office, the one Brad and Tessa use when they visit. The door was cracked no more than a finger's width, but enough. Tessa's voice, first sharper than I remembered. "She's not going to change her mind. You just have to get her to sign before tax season." Then Brad lower measured. "If we wait too long, she might spend it or change the will. You know how people get at that age." There was a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. Tessa again. "She trusts you. Just have the paperwork ready. Don't call it control. Frame it as support." Then the part I already knew, but still wasn't prepared to hear. "Once she signs power of attorney, it's all streamlined. The house, the accounts she won't even notice." There was no malice in his voice. That's what stayed with me the most. Just efficiency, like I was a drawer to be closed properly. I stood completely still in the hallway, one hand resting lightly against the wallpaper. My breathing didn't change. My pulse didn't rise. I listened until the words faded into the soft clack of a keyboard and the scrape of a coffee cup being lifted. Then I turned, slowly. No panic, no dramatic turn on my heel, just a deliberate walk back to my room. I shut the door behind me. Not hard, just enough to feel the latch catch. I turned on the desk lamp, the small one with the cracked base and brass switch Walter had fixed twice before, and sat down in the wooden chair that creaked when I leaned back. The photograph was still there, framed in glass. Walter in his brown wool jacket, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly on my shoulder. The wind had blown my scarf across my cheek that day. I'd kept it in the photo. They weren't planning to help me. They weren't even planning around me. They were planning without me. Not as a lapse, not as an oversight, as a decision. I looked at the edges of the picture frame. Dust had settled in the crevices where glass meets wood. I didn't reach for a cloth. I just looked. I thought about how Brad used to line up his toy cars on the living room carpet, careful to space them evenly, always grouping them by color. He once told me at 6 years old that he didn't like things that didn't fit. I thought it was endearing. I didn't realize he was practicing. I looked at the lamp and noticed how dim it had become over the years. The bulb still worked, but not quite right, like it had been fading slowly and I hadn't paid attention. I reached into the drawer, pulled out the manila folder, and set it next to the picture. They said I wouldn't even notice. But I had. And there are moments, very few but enough, that leave no doubt. They hadn't knocked. They hadn't asked. They had simply made room for themselves in places they believed I'd forgotten to protect. I sat there watching the light bend at the edge of the photoglass and chose not to move. Not yet. Not even to blink the dust from my eyes. Because silence, when held long enough, becomes something else. It becomes evidence. I've learned that stillness makes some people nervous. They expect a reply, a protest, some sign they've struck the right nerve. The pen on my desk had a crack down the barrel. I hadn't noticed it before. It split right through the logo Brad had printed years ago when he first opened his firm. I rolled it slowly between my fingers while Jeanette spoke. Her voice didn't rise or fall, just coasted steadily, like someone used to sorting through worst-case scenarios. Get copies. Everything. And don't tell them you're doing it. She didn't ask for context. I didn't offer it. That afternoon, I laid each document flat on the dining table. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator 2 rooms away. I made 3 sets: bank statements, title deeds, birth certificates, investment summaries. I slid them into envelopes marked one with a blue dot, one with a red, and left one unmarked. The blue went into the spice rack behind the cloves I never used. The red slid beneath the floorboard near the laundry machine. I taped it down with clear strips, slow and careful. The third I mailed with no return address inside a larger envelope addressed to Jeanette's P.O. box. She always said paper was safer than memory. Lauren stopped by 2 days later with a grocery bag of things I hadn't asked for. Her movements were brisk, but her hands lingered on the countertop longer than needed. If something ever happened, if you got sick, wouldn't it be easier to let them handle things? She didn't name them. She never does. I folded a kitchen towel, smoothing the edge with my knuckle. If I weren't on the house title anymore, what would that change? She paused. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Brad mentioned streamlining, less confusion, that kind of thing. I nodded once, slow enough for her to see it settle in. She reached for the fruit bowl, picked up an orange. Put it back. They think you might get overwhelmed. With the taxes, the insurance. All of it. I haven't missed a payment. I know, they just worry. I didn't correct her. I didn't say that worry looks different when it benefits the worrier. She leaned her hip against the counter. You're not accusing them, right? I folded the towel again. If they ask you to choose, don't. Just see clearly. She didn't answer. She left the oranges. Brad called later that week. His voice was clipped, rehearsed. There's a new investment tool for retirees, he began. Very low risk. Just need a few signatures to move funds between protected accounts. I held the receiver against my shoulder, pressing it gently between my ear and collarbone. I didn't write anything down. I'll bring the paperwork this weekend, he added. It's standard. Nothing changes without your consent. Tessa arrived with him holding a sleek leather portfolio and a smile that didn't match the tone of her voice. It's all to give you peace of mind, she said. You'll still have access, technically. Brad spread the pages across the kitchen table. You'll want to initial here. And here. That just gives us permission to manage, not withdraw. Tessa tapped one page with a pen. This clause prevents outside manipulation. Say a scammer calls or someone tries to coerce you. This safeguards everything. I glanced at the text, not really reading. The lines blurred into one another, a wall of reassurance that somehow led only one direction. Tessa reached for a folder. We had this reviewed already, by the way, totally above board. I noticed the coffee ring on the corner of the top page. Circular. Faint. Like someone had set their mug down too confidently. I moved my hand to cover it. Let me sleep on it. Tessa stiffened just slightly. Brad exhaled like he was about to say something, but changed his mind. Of course, she said finally. No pressure. They didn't take the papers with them. They left them on the table spread like a map with a destination I hadn't chosen. I made tea after they left using the chipped mug with the faded daffodils. Walter bought it for me on a roadside trip decades ago. The handle had been glued back once after Brad knocked it off the counter trying to reach something behind me. He was 17. I remember he didn't apologize, just said, "You keep too many old things around." I never threw it out. That night I opened my bottom drawer and took out the envelope I had marked but never sealed. I slipped the unsigned documents inside. Not because I planned to return them, but because they didn't belong out in the open. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Lauren, not Jeanette, not even the mirror in the hall I used to adjust my collar before Sunday services. There's a kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice, that doesn't announce itself, that sits beside a pile of papers and refuses to touch a pen. I've spent most of my life making things easier for others. Folding towels just so, filling silence with small gestures, cleaning up what no one else wanted to name. But this time, the silence wasn't to make things comfortable. This time, It was to make space. And space, I've come to learn, can be a form of defense. Some decisions are made quietly, like folding a sweater you no longer wear, then placing it in the suitcase without looking back. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. There was nothing to explain. No confrontation, no final word, no need to ask for what had already been taken from me in pieces. I packed one suitcase, a black one with a missing wheel that leaned when it rolled. I didn't bother replacing it. It still worked if I walked slowly. The room I moved into was small, not cramped, just honest. A twin bed with a beige blanket, one lamp, a window that opened without protest. I unpacked only what I needed: 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of slacks, a single nightgown, and a book I had started reading 3 times but never finished. The closet smelled faintly of cedar. That comforted me more than it should have. No one called. The silence didn't feel loud. It felt precise. On the second morning, I made tea in a chipped white mug someone had left behind in the cupboard. I sat in the chair by the window, an old wooden frame with one armrest smoother than the other, and held the cup in both hands. There was a thin crack down the side of the mug, curved like a question mark. Outside, a tree leaned into the glass like it was trying to listen in. The leaves hadn't turned yet. They held on like I had longer than they should. Jeanette arrived on the 3rd day. She didn't knock like a guest. She pushed the door open with one hip and set her bag down like she was returning something that belonged to me. She had the folder in her hand and a pen clipped to her coat pocket. No explanations, she said, just corrections. I signed the new forms slowly. My name looked the same, but it felt different, like drawing a line in sand, knowing the tide would come, but not this time. She poured coffee from a thermos and handed me a cup. It was still warm. She didn't use cream or sugar, just drank it black, staring out the same window I had come to sit beside each morning. "These revoke everything they tried to do," she said, tapping the final page. "Power of attorney, account oversight, medical consent, all of it." I nodded once. It didn't need celebration. She stayed 20 minutes. She didn't hug me when she left. That's why I trust her. The apartment didn't echo. It absorbed things. The thud of a cabinet, the hum of the fridge, the soft click of a light switch. I let each sound settle before I moved again. On the 4th day, I found a basket on the doorstep with brochures inside fitness classes, bingo nights, grief support, line dancing. I put them under the sink. Not because I resented them, because I wasn't ready to belong to anything yet. That night I turned off my phone, not out of anger, just a quiet refusal to be reachable by people who never noticed when I'd gone silent before. The next morning, I watered a plant someone had left in the windowsill. The tag, still stuck in the soil, said Peace Lily. One leaf was curled at the edge, but the rest stood upright. I poured just enough water to dampen the topsoil, then turned the pot slightly so the light would touch the other side. When I washed my breakfast plate, I let it air dry. The sponge in the sink had a corner torn off. I used it anyway. I didn't miss the house. I missed the shape of certain hours, the way 4:30 p.m. had a different light through the old kitchen window, the creak of the hallway floor near the coat closet, the way Walter used to hum without realizing it when writing checks. But I didn't miss being expected. I didn't miss being useful. Lauren texted that evening. A single line. "Where are you?" I looked at it for a long time. Then I pressed the side button and let the screen go black. There was nothing in her message that sounded like looking for a person. Only a location. I opened the drawer beside the bed. Inside were 2 pencils, a notepad, and a small sewing kit in a tin shaped like a strawberry. I ran my finger along the seam. Someone before me had mended something small and precious. That thought settled on my chest more firmly than the words I hadn't said. I boiled water again. The kettle squeaked before it clicked off. I used the same mug, now clean, but still cracked. The tea bag wrapper read chamomile, for calm and clarity. I dropped it in, not waiting for the promise. That night I opened the window just enough to let in the sound of wind through the trees. I lay still under the beige blanket, not thinking, just letting the ceiling remain what it was, unmoving, unchanging, unbothered. When I woke up, the air smelled faintly of rain. I made tea without checking my phone. I moved my chair closer to the window. No one asked where I'd gone. No one knocked. No one left a message, but I knew. And this time knowing was enough. I wasn't missing. I wasn't hidden. I wasn't waiting. I was finally and without condition somewhere I chose. I've learned that when people return, it's rarely for the reason you've been hoping. 2 weeks had passed. No message. No voicemail. The silence had a strange texture to it at first, sharp, then dull, then like glass cooled in a window frame. I thought maybe they had accepted it. Maybe they were relieved even. Then the phone buzzed on a Tuesday morning while I was folding a dish towel. Brad's name lit the screen. I watched it until it stopped ringing. Later, a text followed. "We should talk. I think things got misunderstood." No mention of where I was. No, "Are you okay, Mom?" No, "We miss you." Only the word misunderstood, as if deceit were just a misplaced sock. By noon, an email came in from Tessa. No greeting, no body text, just an attachment titled Revocable Living Trust, prepared for Phyllis Merrick. I clicked it open and scrolled. Page after page of declarations, permissions, powers, signatures. Stamps, a notarized seal. My name appeared 6 times. The signature beside each one looked almost right. Almost. I set down my tea without drinking it. The cup left a pale ring on the wood. I didn't wipe it. I forwarded the email to Leah Tran, the attorney Jeanette had referred me to last spring, and added 2 photos, one of Ellie's message scribbled in colored pencil on construction paper. "Grandma, are you still hiding your papers?" And one of a text from an unknown number. "Just help us do this fast. She won't know." I included the audio file too, the one I recorded weeks ago through the cracked office door. Brad's voice low but clear. "If we wait too long, she might spend it or change the will." Followed by Tessa. "She trusts you. Frame it as support. Once she signs, it's seamless." That night, Leah called. Her voice was steady, not surprised. She told me the document had already been submitted to the court. With it, a letter from a clinic I'd never visited, signed by a physician I'd never met, claiming I had early-stage memory deterioration and a tendency to mismanage finances. It stated plainly that I was at moderate risk of exploitation and in need of supervised estate planning. There were 3 names listed under recommended fiduciaries: Brad, Tessa, a third party affiliated with a firm I'd once seen advertised on a golf tournament banner. I didn't cry. I didn't even grip the phone tightly. I just reached for the tin box where I keep old birthday cards. I pulled one out from 3 years ago, the last one Brad wrote before switching to joint family messages. His handwriting then had been messy, but his own. The signature in the trust was tighter, neater off by a hesitation before the second L in Merrick. Leah handled the filing. She included my most recent cognitive assessment from Dr. Myers. My full financial statements showing no irregularities. The metadata on the PDF proving it was drafted and signed digitally without my device, and a letter from Ellie's teacher confirming I regularly picked her up and helped her with her reading logs, evidence of engagement, clarity routine. But the document that said the most was one that didn't bear my hand at all. A side-by-side scan Leah made my real signature next to the trust version. The difference was small enough to fool someone who wasn't looking, but I had always looped the Y in Phyllis like a music note. The forgery flattened it like a shrug. When the court responded, it wasn't dramatic. Just a line in the docket petition for guardianship withdrawn by petitioners. No further action. No apology, no explanation. A week later, Brad sent flowers, white lilies in a box. No card. I left them outside the building for the groundskeeper to take home. Then Tessa left a voicemail. We thought we were doing what was best. Let's not make this into a thing. No mention of the forged signature, no word about the doctor's letter, only a request to move past this and think as a family. I didn't respond. Jeanette asked if I wanted to pursue charges. I shook my head. Some things aren't worth chasing, not because they're small, but because chasing them ties you to people who were never holding your hand to begin with. A few days later, I received a notice from the bank confirming that the power of attorney had been rescinded and access had been restored solely to me. I walked there the next morning and updated my contact information. The banker offered to walk me through online security settings. I declined. I had already printed out every balance sheet and locked the binder in the drawer under the tea bags. I now keep a small spiral notebook near the phone. I jot things down sometimes, not because I'm forgetting, but because I want to remember who said what and when and why it silenced me. This morning, a message blinked on my screen. From Lauren. Mom, I don't know what's going on. Brad says you're being manipulated. Can we talk? I didn't reply. I just stared at the message and thought about how strange it is that people only worry you've changed when they can no longer predict you. Later, as I wiped the counter, I caught a glimpse of the trust document again. I hadn't thrown it away. I'd placed it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, beneath the obituary clippings and the church programs I still couldn't discard. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed to remember. They didn't come back for me. They came for what they thought I wouldn't guard. And this time, I didn't open the door. Not even a crack. I used to wait for people to notice, to ask to remember. Now I carry a small notepad in my purse. Not for shopping lists, just numbers, names, passwords. Things that used to be scattered in drawers or floating between reminders I gave other people. I changed them all, one by one. The online banking login, the will executor, the voicemail pin. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't write down explanations, only initials. Only what mattered. The house sold faster than I expected. I never walked through it again. Leah handled it all as we'd planned. I signed from her office while sipping lukewarm coffee. There was a faint mark on the sleeve of my cardigan foundation, I think from brushing against someone at the senior center earlier that day. I didn't scrub it out. I liked the idea that a stranger had touched me gently in passing and left a mark that wasn't meant to erase me. I didn't tell Brad or Tessa about the sale. I didn't have to. They'd know eventually when the address change bounced or the tax documents reached someone else. Lauren found out a week before closing. She came by alone, wearing an oversized sweatshirt that made her look small again, like she had when she was 15, and trying to hide a bad haircut. I just wanted to say goodbye to the old place, she whispered at the doorway. I opened the screen door, but didn't step aside. She stayed on the porch, fingers tracing the railing. If you're doing this for peace, not spite. I'm glad. She paused. I know you think I looked away. Maybe I did. I didn't answer. I just tilted my head slightly and gave a soft breath through my nose. Enough to let her know I'd heard. Not enough to say I forgave. She kissed my cheek before leaving. It didn't land fully. My skin had cooled in the shade. Back in the rental, I packed my things into 3 piles. Essentials. Sentimentals. Decisions. The last pile stayed untouched for hours. I kept staring at Walter's old mail tray, the one he'd used to organize envelopes, bills, odds, and ends. Beneath a stack of expired coupons and faded receipts, I found a single envelope without a stamp. The handwriting was unmistakable. Slanted to the right. Sloppy in the middle. Walter never liked writing letters, said they felt like goodbyes. Inside was a page half finished. Phil, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to finish it. But I was thinking that's where it stopped. Not a period. Just a dash. I didn't cry. I folded it carefully once, then again, and placed it in the side pocket of my leather bag. It fit beside the notepad. I zipped it up and sat down. The new place has a view not of mountains, not of lakes. Just a crooked path of stones leading to a low white fence, and beyond that, glimpses of the sea if the morning fog lifts. I don't check the weather anymore before going out. I keep a scarf in the bag. I've started wearing my older shoes again, the ones that don't match anything. But remember how my feet used to move when I still danced in the kitchen. Jeanette stopped by with lemon bars and a folder. Inside, confirmation of transfer. The house sold the funds. Secure, no one authorized but me. She looked around my little space. One chair, one kettle, 2 cups, just in case. You're light now, she murmured. Like someone emptied your pockets. I didn't say anything, just offered her the nicer cup. I've begun making tea the long way, heating the water on the stove, timing it by feel. No kettle noise. Just instinct. The bags I use are plain black, the kind Walter liked. I add a slice of lemon sometimes just for the color. One night I saw my reflection in the microwave door, warped, stretched sideways. But something caught me off guard. My shoulders didn't slope. My eyes weren't waiting. The next day, I cleaned out the last of the donation boxes. I let go of the cardigan with the pearl buttons, the baking tin I never used, the photo albums, with faces that no longer looked at me with anything but obligation. In the mirror, I wore a gray blouse. No collar, no brooch, just fabric and skin and a neck that didn't bow. I got a message from Brad 2 days ago. One sentence. We need to talk about your decisions. Not your health, not your comfort, not even you. Just your decisions. I placed my phone face down and let it ring later. He called again. Then Tessa. Then silence. No one asked how I slept, what book I was reading, whether the sea was visible that morning. But the neighbor did. Mrs. Eaton, 2 doors down, waved with her garden gloves still on. Fogs lifting, she smiled. You'll see blue today. And I did. I sat with tea in hand, a dull spoon resting inside like an anchor. I watched the light hit the spoon's edge. I thought about how many years I'd spent polishing things for other people, not silver. Expectations. The woman in the reflection didn't flinch. She just blinked. Once. That was enough. I used to check locks twice. Once before leaving. Once again after. Not because I feared strangers, but because I feared forgetting. Leaving something undone. Something open. Now I carry one key. It fits a plain white door with chipped paint and a handle that clicks rather than turns. The house is mine. No one else has the copy. The old key, the one to the house where my name was ignored but still stamped on the deed, I slid into a plain envelope and sealed it without hesitation. I wrote nothing on the front. Just tucked it inside the folder for Leah and added a note on top. Please give this to someone who needs a home, not a vault. I didn't reread the sentence. I didn't try to soften it. That same morning, I drafted a letter to Brad. No return address. Just a folded sheet of cream paper unlined. I no longer hold anything of yours, and you no longer hold anything of mine. No signature. He'd know, or he wouldn't. Either way, I wouldn't be watching the mailbox. At the new place, I keep the windows open as often as the wind allows. Cannon Beach isn't quiet, it breathes. The waves reach the porch on some mornings, and the gulls do not ask permission to cry. But no voices come from hallways. No footsteps hover near closed doors. The silence here is not absence, it is space. I bought a pour-over kettle after reading 3 articles about how to do it right. I measured the grounds the first few times. Now I just know. The bloom, the slow spiral, the rising steam that fogs my glasses. I sit by the wide front window with the mug still too hot to hold and write 1 sentence each morning in a small spiral-bound notebook with a black elastic band. Some days it's a memory, other days it's a sentence that feels borrowed from someone I used to be. Today I wrote letting go isn't loss, it's permission. The herb garden is small rosemary thyme, a stubborn patch of mint. I water them at dusk. The hose kinks near the faucet, and I've learned the angle to fix it without bending twice. These small things I never used to remember them. I remembered birthdays, appointments, grocery preferences, but never what I needed to make my own tools work. A package came from Ellie last week. No card, just a small clay dish shaped like a shell and a note on ruled paper. Found this at art class. Looks like something you'd like. Or maybe it looks like something you wouldn't throw away. The tape had been carefully peeled back and restuck, as if she'd opened the box after sealing it, then decided to let it go. I placed the shell dish on my bedside table. It holds my wedding band now, not because I'm clinging, but because the ring deserves something quiet, not a drawer. I haven't changed my number, though I've considered it. Last Friday, Brad's name lit up the screen again. Just his name. No message. I watched it until it stopped. Then again. Tessa this time. Just 1 word in the preview. Clarify. I turned the phone over. The sound it made against the wood table reminded me of the time I dropped Walter's shaving brush, and the bristles bent just enough to look like they were reaching for something. Jeanette visited a few days ago, her scarf flung over one shoulder, the way younger women wear capes. She brought a pie she didn't bake and stories I didn't finish. Halfway through her coffee, she asked if I regretted not confronting them directly. I placed my cup down carefully. The saucer clicked. What would I be confronting? She blinked. That they tried to steal something that wasn't even about money. I stared at the rim of my cup. They didn't steal it. I left it. And then I walked somewhere else. The next morning I changed the locks anyway. Not because I thought they'd come. Because I wanted the motion. The sound of a screwdriver. The feel of tightening something with my own weight behind it. I went back inside and locked the door. Not for safety. For closure. I'd never done that before. I'd always been the one who left the door ajar. For laundry for neighbors, for children who might need to run in from the rain. Now I sit with my back to the door and the whole horizon in front of me. The letter from Brad hasn't come. Maybe he won't write. Maybe he will. If he does, I won't read it all at once. I don't owe speed to anyone anymore. Ellie texted again. Do you still like storms? I replied. Only when they end. She sent back a photo, her feet in rain boots standing at the edge of a puddle. I didn't save it. But I didn't delete it either. The shell dish caught the light at sunset. The gold band inside it flickered. It used to feel like a symbol of belonging. Now it feels like a chapter title. I don't know if they ever understood what they tried to take. I don't know if they understood that I didn't fight, because there was nothing of me left in that house to protect. But I know this, I sent back the key. And for the first time in years, I can lock the door without fearing who might be waiting on the other side. I no longer ask if the silence means I've done something wrong. The kettle clicks off before the whistle. I time it by instinct now. One scoop of loose leaf, the spoon worn smooth at the handle. I pour slowly, circling. The steam rises and curls into the room without asking to be let in. The tomatoes are just beginning to turn. I check them each morning. I don't rush them. They'll ripen when they do. Brad's firm released a public statement. No comment on internal personnel changes. I didn't read it. Leah summarized everything in one line. They're cutting ties. He hasn't called since, not even to pretend he didn't know what he signed. Tessa sent a voicemail once, 5 seconds of static, then her voice clipped and distant. You knew what you were doing. I deleted it without listening to the end. Lauren came by last Saturday with a book of coastal birds and 2 plums in a paper bag. We didn't talk much. She just sat near the screen door and turned pages. Around chapter 3, she looked up. They're not mad, just exposed. I stirred the batter slowly. Exposure isn't punishment. She nodded once. Left the book behind. The headlines didn't reach far, but they spread where it mattered. The PTA group chat stopped tagging Tessa in event planning. The neighbors stopped waving as they walked past Brad's porch. Ellie mentioned that her teacher had moved her seat closer to the window. It's quieter over there. I like it better. She comes on weekends now. Sometimes she brings crumpled pages from her drawing pad. Yesterday's was a house on a hill with a garden of oversized herbs and a swing hanging from nowhere. This is us, she said. I asked who the small figure near the door was. That's the one who never forgot me. She doesn't use names much anymore. Only roles. The ones she chooses. The house smells like mint in the afternoon. I trim the stems before the sun drops too low. The old trowel from Walter's shed has a crack near the grip. I still use it. I like the way it fits my palm. The last letter he ever wrote sat in a drawer for years. I knew where it was. I never touched it. I'd find it sometimes nestled between old bank statements and brittle photo corners. It didn't ask to be read. I didn't ask it to explain. This week I opened it. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the ink was firm, his handwriting careful. If you ever find yourself pushed to the edge of a room you built, remember, you are never only what they made of you. You are what you choose again and again until the choosing itself becomes home. I read it twice. No tears, just breath. Slow, full. I framed it in the same wood he used to line the window seat. The one Ellie curls up on with her socks half off and a book upside down in her lap. I hung the letter above my desk, not for inspiration, for anchoring. One afternoon, as I folded dish towels, Ellie asked if I ever missed them. I mean, the old version of them. I handed her the stack. What you miss isn't always what you want back. She didn't answer, just nodded the way she does when she doesn't have words yet. I kept one voicemail from Brad, not because it said anything worth hearing, but because it ended with something unintentional. He paused too long before hanging up. In that silence, I heard traffic, a car door shutting, and then faintly, Ellie's voice calling for her backpack. That's the part I replayed. I don't keep many things now, just the necessary and the meaningful. A chipped mug with a faded pine cone, a sweater with one elbow patched, a grocery list from last winter written in Walter's hand with batteries misspelled. I keep the curtain pulled back near the writing desk. It's not for the view. It's for the way the light touches the floor differently each hour, like time choosing where to rest. On Sundays, I bake. Ellie helps when she's here. When she's not, I leave some out wrapped in cloth. Lauren takes a few. The rest I donate to the shelter down the road. No one needs to know where they came from. No one has to clap for quiet kindness. The rosemary bush finally bloomed. I didn't notice at first. I was sweeping the porch when I smelled something sharp and familiar. I followed it without urgency. The blossoms were pale blue, small, almost forgettable, but they stood out against the soil. Just enough. Somewhere in town, people still talk. Whispers, half-truths, reshaped stories. I'm no longer interested in who believes what. The truth doesn't need defenders, it only needs time. The sea doesn't hold a grudge, it recedes and returns. It doesn't demand to be heard. Neither do I. I sent Leah one last email. Everything's settled. No further action needed. She replied with a smiley face and a single word. Understood. I made tea and lit the small candle Ellie gave me a birthday gift she made at school. Waxy and uneven, but steady. A knock came once last week. I didn't answer. Not because I was hiding, because I was busy listening to the kettle. I used to believe peace was a reward. Now I know it's a decision, and I've made mine. I no longer need a place at anyone's table. I've built my own sturdy and small facing the water. And finally, I sit not as someone's mother or wife or burden, but as myself, once and always.